So a few months ago, Pastor CJ and I were having a conversation about how to explain to people outside of the church what we do as pastors. What do we want the church to be known for? Not just community, but the church in general. At the end of the day, what is it that we're really trying to offer people? And in the course of that conversation, my mind kept being drawn to hope. What I'm giving my life to as a pastor is hope. What I want to offer people through the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ is hope. This is different than optimism. Optimism, that sort of blind belief that things are always going to be okay and are always moving towards being better. This hope is tenacious. This hope is resilient. This is hope that our lives can be different in God than what the world says that they ought to be or what it expects of us. This is hope for the broken, wounded places in our life to experience recreation and restoration through God's grace. This is hope that this world and all of its pain and death and suffering do not get the last word. Hope. In our conversations in the round, we closed out our time talking and sharing around this idea of hope. And you're going to get a chance to listen to some of the responses as folks answered the question, how does your faith give you hope for the future? This conversation to this particular question, there was so much there. It went on for 20, 25 minutes. This answered the question. We've tried to splice it down to the most salient points for you today, but still to give everybody around the table a chance to answer that. How does faith give you hope for the future? So
How does your faith give you hope for the future?
I know the end of the story, and it's all going to work out in the end. God's in control, and we're all going to be fine. We just trust in Him and follow Him.
Gives me hope that stuff like COVID and stuff like that's we're gonna be able to get through it somehow. Mm-hmm. We're gonna be able to figure out what we have to eventually be able to figure out and get through it and stuff like that. Just can't really think of how to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that we're here for a time and there's always a solution. He's going to provide us the tools and the calm and the foresight. He gave us wonderful intellects, and I think if we have faith in that, having hope gives you faith in the future, knowing that you are supported, spiritually in all the things that are happening around you, with the people around you as well as with yourself. We'll be okay. Mm-hmm. I know that we are not going to suffer through COVID until the end of time. That is not what God created the heavens and the earth for.
This too shall pass, yes.
On here. Right. And we just know that. And you look, it's kind of interesting because in some of the most difficult, stressful times of my life, you feel like you're there forever. Mm-hmm. And then you're not. And you're okay. Mm-hmm. And the solutions many times, in some of my worst circumstances, the outcomes through all of that stress, I reflect on now, and I'm like, I am in a better place. I am glad I went through those things. Yes. Because He's just making you stronger. He's making you more flexible. Moving from one school to another school, finding new friends. it's hard, and you don't want to let go of those relationships, but in that you find all these new relationships. But you're also training yourself, and you've got that support, meeting new people, and that's going to happen all of our lives, and we do it, and we have that support. And again, when I'm stressed out and I need calm, I pray for calm, and usually through that, I'm given calm, and it's just going to be okay. COVID's temporary, and then it'll be the next challenge, and the one after that.
That's right.
I'll chime in on this one because I actually had the privilege of giving the message at church one Sunday when the pastors were gone. and it was about faith. I think the title of my sermon was "Finding Your Faith," and for me, it seems that if you're paying attention to how God has intervened in the situations in your life in the past, He has set you up to understand that He will be there in the future. And to me, that is the most consoling thing I can think of, is I look back and I've made it through all those, some of them were very stressful things in my life where I thought the end was near. And it wasn't, obviously. And if I can look back and see what He taught me then I can know no matter what's coming up in the future, we're good to go.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things. I wouldn't say the hardest, but it's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, like you said, if I didn't have God, there's no way I could have survived it.
That's right.
That was, many things in my life. If I didn't have God, I wouldn't be here today.
I wanted you to hear so much of that because it was so rich. The conversation, the testimonies that people share. I know if we took the microphone and we walked around this room today and we let the folks online share in the chat, that you would have testimonies too about how your faith gives you hope for the future, about the places where God has showed up in your lives. So much depth. From Parker saying that faith gives him hope that no matter what, we're going to be able to get through things somehow, to Bobby speaking about how faith gives her hope because she knows the end of the story, right? We don't have to be people who guess and wonder. We know that God reigns triumphantly. And so we can trust even in the midst of trouble and follow Him. We say that a beautiful reminder of the fact that we know the end of the story when we celebrate communion together. Christ has died, Christ is risen, and Christ will come again, right? And there's a passage that this called to mind for me, that it comes from 1 Thessalonians, that I often use at graveside services, that talks about how we do not have to grieve as people who have no hope. Because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we have this living hope for our lives. And then Mike's words, if you're paying attention to how God has intervened in the situations in your life in the past, He has set you up to understand that He will be there for you in the future. When we look back at all the pain and the struggles and the things that we have had, sometimes when we're going through them, we don't necessarily feel God's presence in those moments, but God is there. And when we look back, we can see how hope has sustained us. And that can give us hope for getting through whatever might come in the future. When I was listening to him say that in the interview, it brought to my mind something I'd seen online recently. that says, on particularly rough days, when I'm sure that I just can't possibly endure, I remind myself that my track record for getting through bad days with God's help so far is 100%. And that's pretty good. Our faith can give us hope for the future. And then Bree's comment. You know, we had to edit this way down, and in the course of that whole conversation around the table that day, Bree shared the pain that she and her husband have been experiencing with infertility and suffering a miscarriage. That's the context for what Bree says about how faith gives her hope. That if I didn't have God, there's no way I could have survived. Many times in my life, if I didn't have God, I wouldn't be here today. And then I didn't forget Eric's comments there in the middle. God's going to provide us the tools and the calm and the foresight. Having hope gives you faith in the future, knowing you're supported in all the things that are happening around you. In the most difficult and stressful times of my life, you feel like you're there forever, and then you're not, and you're okay. The solution many times in some of my worst circumstances, the outcome through all of that stress I reflect on now, I'm in a better place. I'm glad I went through those things because they made me stronger. They made me more flexible. For me, Eric's testimony echoes our scripture lesson today from 1 Peter. In his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. In all this you rejoice, even though now you suffer trials of all kinds. These have come to show the genuineness of your faith. We're training. We're learning. We're growing. Hopefully, we're building on that muscle memory that our faith can help give us hope for the future. This letter is attributed to the Apostle Paul. He was writing to a group of churches in 5 different Roman provinces on what was called Asia Minor. Then all of it today is modern-day Turkey. Many of the believers in these churches were Gentiles who had been converted to follow in the way of Jesus. And they have begun experiencing all kinds of issues and problems of disconnection to their own families and their communities because of their newfound faith. In some places, they're also experiencing persecution from their local government. This was a letter of encouragement, a reminder of the living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You know, we don't follow a great teacher who was once alive and is now dead. We follow a great teacher who was once alive and was dead and is alive again and is living through all of us now through the Spirit today. The difficult things that you and I are experiencing in this world, the trials and tribulations of life, can be redeemed by God. Can teach us about God and ourselves if we're open to them. We don't have to despair even when things seem dark and hopeless, because while it might seem like we're stuck in this cycle forever, we aren't. And God is making a way even when there seems to be no way. Our faith can give us hope for our lives, and it can give us hope for our church as well, church in general, and this particular community. And so everyone around the table that day shared their hopes for the future of Community United Methodist Church as well. So let's take a listen to some of their answers.
I just see us doing all kinds of mission and outreach work to lift people up, to encourage them to know God, and I think there are good things ahead for us in talking to people. And this, I know that's, what people want for this church. We're a mission-minded group, and we want to make disciples. And I think that we're going to find the ways to do that, maybe in a different way than we've done before. But I think it's going to be really good.
Parker, you mentioned Winterfest. And to me, one of the things that drew me to this church was the energy. 9:30 service concludes, and there's a cacophony. The kids running around, a donut in one hand and a rolled up piece of paper or whatever they could find to be a pretend sword. But that energy, it's a buzz. And I'm looking around, it's total chaos, but it's the families and it's the people and it's the fellowship and that, that building each other up and having a common belief and a common faith. Winterfest is the same way. I mean, that's outreach to the community. That's bringing people here. And that's what I want to see for this church. I think trunk or treat is a wonderful thing. I mean, thousands of people roll through this parking lot and they're here. They may not come to this church, but they're here and they're with the people of the church. And it gives an opportunity. And it's the same thing with Winterfest, that opportunity. But I want to feel that buzz. Donuts and coffee is not just donuts and coffee.
No.
It's the kids running around. It's the...
Insignificant moments.
Oh, but they're so significant.
And
I kind of just hope that the church is able to continue to serve the community. I mean, COVID and other stuff has changed, and over time, the needs of the community have changed, and so how we help them has changed. Pre-COVID, trunk or treat was everyone would come and walk through. But when COVID started, we did the drive-through trunk and treat, and so we were still able to do that and help. Winterfest used to be the carnival where everybody could come and have fun and be able to have food and not have to pay for anything. Thousands of people, and then because of COVID, we couldn't really do that, and so we instead changed it to where we'd go to places like the gas station and help them buy them gas, or the store and help them get groceries, or we would give them food at the church, and we would do stuff like that. So I just mean being able to help and serve the community throughout however you can and whichever way you can, because it's not always going to stay the same or be the same. It'll change as the needs of the people change.
You don't see a lot of people out there, churches out there, that do a ministry like we're doing with Winterfest this time. You don't see that. You may see the carnivals, and that's pretty common. You don't see that kind of ministry. Not around here, I should say. My little small town, but
I think it's been really hard in the past couple of years to see the church in its full light, and the old saying, actions speak louder than words. And I think going forward, for me, that the church will be what it acts on. You can say all you want to say, and you can preach all you want to preach, but if we're not acting on it, nobody's going to see us. They're not going to know we're here. And I want to see that happen more and more and more. And our involvement in the community is great. Can it be greater? Sure it can.
Yes.
Sure it can. Let God lead us there. Let God show us where that is and take us there and show us how our actions need to be put into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I love the testimonies here. And you know what? You're actually going to get to see the whole conversation. We're going to post it online at some point later on this week, the entire thing, so you can catch all the moments in between. But the testimonies here about the hope for the future of the church, mission and outreach work, to encourage people to know God, to make disciples, maybe in a different way, the energy of children and worship, common belief and a common faith, big moments like Winterfest and Trunk and Treat, and recognizing that what might even seem like insignificant moments are not so insignificant. hope that the church will still be able to serve the community, and that as the needs of the people change, our methods might change and adapt in order to be able to meet them where they are. And then that final word from Mike, actions speak louder than words. Church will be what it acts on. You can say it and you can preach it, but if you don't act on it, nobody's going to see it. I remember the first time that I preached on these words from 1 Peter. It was at the first church I served just outside of Fort Myers. That church was in a neighborhood that in the 1950s, when it was established, was a white suburb of downtown Fort Myers. And in the early 2000s, when I arrived, the entire neighborhood was a mix of Hispanics and entirely Spanish-speaking. Our neighborhood had a lot of poverty, and that poverty drove a lot of gang activity and a lot of crime. The church, though, seemed pretty isolated from it until one day when it wasn't. I think I'd been there about a year and a half when we had a 6-week span in which the church was broken into 8 different times. And I kept being drawn to these words from 1 Peter about a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That even in our trials, Christ might be revealed. And I remember thinking that our response as a church was going to be the decision point about whether this church lived or died. Were we going to become more insular, work to tighten up our security, withdraw from the neighborhood and protect our stuff? Or could we possibly find a way to be people of a living hope and look for something beyond us and do something and stay present in our community? Could we meet people, actually learn what the real needs were of people who were around us and do something about them to reach out? That's the church I went back to preach at in December as they celebrated their 75th anniversary as a congregation. When I was appointed there, they wanted to merge them with a congregation down the road. That congregation is long since gone, and so are some of the others. And some of the others have been merged together, and Tice is still there. Their numbers aren't what you would consider huge. They're always struggling somehow financially to make things work, but the amount of mission and ministry that happens out of that church for that neighborhood to bring hope to people's lives is absolutely astounding. So much so that other churches in the district contribute to help them be able to do mission and ministry there. They have put their faith and their hope into action. I believe in what Bobby shared as part of her answer. I believe that there are many wonderful days ahead of this congregation, building on everything that has come for over the last 100 years. I have hope in you, and I have hope in Jesus through you. We are people of a living hope because of the resurrection of Jesus. That reminds us that even when hope seems buried and in a tomb, that everything is gone, that we don't have to count God out. So I invite the band to come back up and get in place. I want to draw your mind to one other resurrection text that happens really not all that long before Jesus' resurrection. when Jesus stands outside the tomb of his friend Lazarus, and he grieves and he weeps. Mary and Martha, they come out to Jesus. They have hope in Jesus. They believe that if Jesus had been there, their brother would not have died, right? But they think since Lazarus is in the tomb, it's all over and done. And Jesus walks up to a tomb and he calls Lazarus forth. And suddenly hope is restored. God is calling us by name out of all of our brokenness and our woundedness and our suffering to say, this doesn't get the last word. We are being called out of despair into hope, into recreation and restoration. It may not look like how we anticipated that it would, but it is hope nonetheless. And my prayer for all of us is that we will internalize that we will be people of a living hope because of the resurrection of Jesus, and that we will be able to take that and go out into the world as agents of hope, as carriers of hope, to bring that to people who need to hear that too.